at NABJ, the question of DEI came up. And the reporter asked Donald Trump if he thought Kamala Harris was a DEI hire. And here, the conversation went in a whole different direction. Check it out. Check it out.
Sir, do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that she is
somebody should look into that?
So obviously the internet has been on fire. The social media world has had at least 24 hours of intense debates. My mentions are in shambles because I had the audacity to weigh in on this on Twitter or X or whatever, and I'm just getting hit by bots and haters and racists and idiots. What do you make of what Donald Trump said there?
Oh, he hit it out the ballpark. He hit a hump grand slam.
Wow.
And let me tell you, Mark, what you won't hear black media and black social media talking about, this was Trump's Sister Soldier moment from 1982. Bill Clinton goes to Jesse Jackson with Sister Soldier and destroys Jesse Jackson. Trump did that yesterday on steroids. Now, you will concede, Mark, in 2020, Joe Biden, as candidate and ultimately the Democrat nominee, said to black folks, if you make me your nominee, I am picking a black female for my running mate. He made that crystal clear. He went on to say that if you make me your president, I get a pick on the Supreme Court, it will be a black female. That's the definition of a DEI hire. That's the definition of it.
That is not the definition of a DEI hire. But
black female. So if you are a white female and have all the jurisprudence accolade that you can find, if you are a white male and you have all the political experience, you cannot be considered for vice president or the Supreme Court because he relegated those two slots for black female. That's what he said in his own words.
So there's 2 or 3 pieces here that we're going to get at. The first thing is conservatives have consistently used the framework of DEI hire not to speak about diversity as an institutional benefit or good, but to frame it as unmerited success. They're not saying DEI hire to say that as part of an initiative to diversify the Supreme Court or as part of a commitment to diversifying political representation, Joe Biden said, I'm going to choose Kamala Harris, right? Because if you said
because she's black and female.
Because if that's what you said, well, that's what diversifying would be, because the Supreme Court didn't have any black women on.
It could have been, why not a white woman? Why not a Hispanic woman?
Because we just talked about diversity as an institutional good and benefit in and of itself. But just hear me out. My point is, when the right wing is using DEI hire, you're a DEI hire. They call me a DEI hire too. They call people DEI hires. They're not talking about a different philosophical position about diversifying based on identity politics. They are saying quite explicitly, and I can show you tape of this, that the person is unqualified. It's the same dumb argument they make about affirmative action. They're saying that she didn't deserve to be a senator, that she didn't deserve to be VP, that she doesn't deserve to be president. They are literally on the record saying that she's mediocre intellectually, that she's not smart, that she's not talented, and that she's only there because she's a black woman. And what I'm expressing to you, what I'm communicating to you, is that the purpose of affirmative action, the purpose of diversity initiatives was never to put unqualified people in spaces to fail or to be mediocre. The point of it was to say these are qualified people already, but
he didn't say that, Mark. Joe Biden said in the Supreme Court and vice president pick, I am picking a black female. He didn't say I am going to pick the most qualified, most politically savvy person who will be a black female. He said he undercut his own argument because what he should have said is, I am going to look for the best qualified, even if he knew in the back of his head it was going to be a black female. You undercut their whole standing by doing that.
No, you don't. How many people? How many people? And this is really like two different debates. We're going to talk about her blackness too, but how many people do you think are sufficiently qualified to be vice president right now? Or president?
Anyone that meets the statutory definition that being
no,
an American-born citizen.
That would be just demographic. I'm talking about if right now Kamala Harris is choosing a VP, right? How many people from all the people, not just talking about her finalists, how many people do you think are actually qualified? If you look at just the House, the Senate, all the governor's mansions, private industry, do you think it's more than 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 people that could be
it's thousands of people who are qualified. Now, do they have the skill set? That's a different question. Qualified means they meet the Constitution, the statutory definition.
That's not what qualified means. But let's combine our two respective. I'm saying not just somebody who's 40 years old and can read and is a U.S. born citizen. I'm saying like who could perform the job well. You don't think there's like a one person? There's no soulmate here for VPs. There's probably dozens of people who could be a good VP.
No question.
Right. So, do you think any of them are black?
It could be if they like Westmore from Maryland, the governor of Maryland.
All right. Let me ask you a question. Of those hundreds of qualified people, are any of those qualified people white?
Oh, tons of them.
Do you hear yourself? So. For white people, you go, oh, yeah, definitely some qualified white people. For black people, you say, could be. So you're beginning from a presumption that white competence is normal and taken for granted, but black competence has to be proven.
No. When you say, Mark, I'm going to pick a vice presidential candidate or a Supreme Court justice if they meet these two criteria, black and female. He didn't say they had a 3.5 GPA from Harvard Law School or anything. He says strictly because of the color of their skin and their gender. Those are my only two criteria. He set them up for a.
He didn't say that.
Yeah, he did.
No, he did not say
black female.
This is what he said. He did not say those are my only two criteria. So you think he would have picked a Republican? You think he would have picked a Republican black woman?
No, there are plenty who will qualify, but no, it wouldn't make political sense for him to do that.
So again, even though he didn't say she had to be liberal, you know that implicit in him saying I'm going to pick a black woman, that he means a liberal black woman.
No, it could have been a centrist black woman that leans Democrat.
Fine, but what I'm saying is, you know, he wasn't going to pick a Republican.
Right? Oh, no, that's a fair.
He didn't say
statement.
it, but it was implicit that he didn't mean a Republican black woman.
Right? That's a fair statement.
You know that he wasn't going to pick somebody for VP who had never been in public office. Is that fair?
For VP, yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
He didn't say I'm going to pick a black woman who's had a job before in public office, but you took for granted that she would have one. So when he said a black woman, we already knew that there were other things that we could reasonably expect to also be part of her dossier and her profile, other than just her blackness and her womanness. But when
because Democrats have.
Hear me out. But when we say a black woman, all of a sudden we start to question her competence as a default. Who picks a vice president that's not competent? Who picks a vice president that's not qualified beyond the statutory dimensions? But somehow, when a white man says, I'm going to pick a Southerner because I need to pick up some states, no one thinks, well, he didn't say a qualified Southerner. He just said a Southerner, because you assume the white man is qualified. When somebody says, I'm going to pick a governor, right? Because I need some executive branch experience. I need somebody who's governed before, Mike Pence, right? When he says, I'm looking for a governor, right? He didn't say I'm looking for a qualified governor, a successful governor, a well-educated governor. He just said a governor, right? But you assume the white man governor he's going to pick was qualified. So why don't you presume that the black woman who he's going to pick or appoint to the Supreme Court it has more value than just her blackness and her womanness?
Well, no, in an ideal world, I would agree with your argument and your logic. But because we don't live in the ideal world, Mark, I hope you will agree with me on this narrow point, that the mere fact that Biden and other politicians have done it, corporate leaders have done it, saying my replacement for IBM will be a Hispanic female. They've all, but my point being, that could be your goal inside your head. But the moment you verbalize and say black female, you undercut her credibility because people are going to begin to question, well, is that the reason why she got this position?
That's bullshit,
her sex and her gender versus her qualifications?
I'm going to tell you why that's bullshit. They didn't think black women were smart before this shit happened. They didn't think black women were smart before affirmative action. They think people act, this is what, it's such a disingenuous argument. You know, because of affirmative action, you know, when a black person gets a job or a black person gets into Harvard or Yale, we don't know if they're smart. Y'all didn't think niggas were smart before affirmative action. There's no long legacy of thinking black people were smart and then affirmative action came and killed it. They didn't think we were smart before. The only difference was they thought we were not smart and we didn't get into Harvard.
Let me tell you an interesting story and tell me if you agree. And you may remember, I used to work for H.W. Bush, President Bush 41. That's where I cut my political teeth working for him. And I remember when Thurgood Marshall resigned his seat in 91 for the Supreme Court. He was leaving the court. First black on the court, appointed by LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson. And I remember very vividly, Mark, Jesse Jackson, Ben Hooks, Perrin Mitchell, all these luminary black folks, Barbara Jordan, saying, President Bush, this is a black seat. You must replace Thurgood Marshall with another black. And so we're in the White House having the same discussion. And everyone in the party knew that they had fast-tracked Clarence Thomas to be the next black Supreme Court. It was no secret within Republican circles, especially. So when President Bush named Clarence Thomas, Jesse Jackson, all these guys went apoplectic because they said, we said it was a black seat, but not that kind of a black seat. But we gave them what they asked for, a black replacement, but they didn't stipulate he had to be a liberal. Clarence is a conservative, as we know. And so my point being, President Bush, I call him old man Bush affectionately, he would have never said that I am going to pick a black replacement if I get a pick on the Supreme Court that's black and conservative. He said, I'm going to pick the best qualified, knowing in his mind who he's going to pick and what the criteria was. He would have never verbalized it and undercut Clarence Thomas's standing.
And again, people are qualified outside of their gender and their race.
Well, you saying that should be a given, is what you're saying.
Yes, because we're not picking out of a hat. We're not picking out of a hat. We're picking at a... Ketanji Brown Jackson has a bachelor's degree from Harvard. She has a JD from Harvard. She was a supervising editor of the Harvard Law Review. She clerked for major people. She was on all the district courts. She was the head of the Sentencing Commission. She's done every single job you're supposed to do to be on the Supreme Court. Why would you assume that she's not qualified when you look at her resume?
Her record is so impressive that nobody with an ounce of sense could say she's not qualified. She's eminently qualified. There's no question about that.
So, but there's also 5 other people who might also be eminently qualified who are white men. And there might be 5 white women who are eminently qualified. But there are no black women on the Supreme Court. So it's not, DEI is not saying we're going to take an unqualified black woman and leapfrog the qualified white people. It's saying in this room of qualified people, we need to factor in some other things because diversity needs to be in every institution. I'll give you an example. When you're looking at a case, when you're examining a story, when you're understanding a narrative, your own personal history comes in. Your own experiences shape how you understand something, right?
Yep.
If everybody's experience is as a white man, that ain't helpful. So you don't want a court filled with white men, even if they're all eminently qualified. If everybody goes to an Ivy League school, and as you know, that court is filled with Ivy League people, maybe you want somebody that went to CUNY Law School. Because maybe there's something about going to a public institution or working class institution that gives you a different analysis than the hardcore academic, traditional, rigid academic approach to the law. My point is, you might want people of different religious faiths, different geographic. You don't want everybody from New York to be on the court. You want some people from Chicago, or not Chicago per se, but you want somebody from the Midwest. Maybe you want some Southerners on the court because of different traditions. But if the president said, I'm going to appoint a Southerner to the court, y'all wouldn't be saying, well, how you gonna just appoint a Southerner? You just gonna pick anybody named Bubba from the South? No, of course, I'm picking qualified Southerners. Their competence is taken for granted. But
okay, let me drill down and ask you. Let me ask you this question. See, and this is a nuanced question here. I don't support diversity for the sake of diversity. I support diversity because I think it brings value to the conversation. But what the Democrats have done, they have become so obsessed with bean counting. Okay, we got 9 people in this commission here. We got to have at least 1 black, 1 female, 1 homosexual, 1 this, 1 that. If that's your goal, it's just diversity for the sake of diversity, I'm not down with that.
So you're okay with a Supreme Court that's all Muslim?
Oh, did I lose you?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yeah, you froze up for a second.
Oh, I said, so you're okay with the Supreme Court that's all Muslim?
That's all Muslim. Hey, if that's what happens over the course of time and presidents pick all these Muslim, I may not like it, but hey, they made the appointments, and so I have to live with that. But to say to me that you want a Christian,
my follow-up is, if the next president says, you know what, we need religious diversity on this court because different faith traditions have different understandings of ethics, values, and we're in a Christian country, and we want to have somebody on the court that's also representative of the religious diversity of our country, I'm going to appoint a non-Muslim this time. You're saying that'd be wrong?
No, but see, the problem is when you say I'm going to put this litmus test, it's going to be a black female, it's going to be a Muslim, it's going to be a Jew. All of a sudden now what people hear, not what the fact is, what they hear is I'm being excluded from consideration because of diversity's sake.
The only people who say that are white men.
No. When Biden said what he said about what the Supreme Court and VP picking 20, the first word out of my mouth is he just undercut their credibility and their standing. If he does what he just said he's going to do, because you can have diversity, Mark. You don't have to go out there and say, I'm going to pick from this box, that box. Go out there and just pick the best qualified, but interview other folks and make it seem as though you're considering a broad spectrum of people. But when you say, I'm only going to pick a white female or a Hispanic Mexican woman for this particular slot, you create division unnecessarily.
And what I'm saying is the division is already there. It's not as if we're in this neutral, diverse, complex, cosmopolitan canopy, and suddenly some liberal politician says, you know what? We need more Negroes. What actually happens is we already are unequal. We already have an imbalance. And so the diversity initiative is an attempt to push back against the lack of diversity that's already there. There have been 114 Supreme Court justices as of, I'm just pulling up the data here to make sure I got it right. This is as of 2024. I mean, I think the number might be 117 now. But let's just say as of 2020, right? There had been 114 Supreme Court justices. How many do you think were white men?
Up until 20, what? Other than 2 or 3 now, minus 3.
Right. So there was some others. There's Clarence. There's the women. I said white men. So the answer is 108. So if 108 out of 114 people in the whole history of America were white men, then you can't tell me as a white man that me saying I'm not picking a white man this time somehow disenfranchises white men. Because the white men who up until Brandeis, I mean, when you think about even like non-Jews, right? Because Jews couldn't be appointed on the Supreme Court either, right? There was anti-Semitism, there's all this stuff. You can't tell me that all those white men who were qualified up until Thurgood Marshall were the only qualified people. There were white women who were qualified. There were black men who were qualified. There were black women who were qualified. They never got a shake. And these aren't, 2-year jobs. These are the average Supreme Court jurist, I think, was like 17 years up into the 70s. Now it's like 28 years. Point being, these are long-term jobs. So if everybody's been a white man, I don't think it's crazy to say, you know what? Since everybody's been a white man and we want diversity, as you said, as an institutional value, right? We think better. We get more ideas. Then maybe we don't need all white men. And for Joe Biden to say, look, black women made me president, and black women have been denied access to the Supreme Court, how dare I use you for your votes and not appoint what you actually deserve? Y'all the first people as conservatives to say, get off the Democratic plantation. They don't give y'all nothing, and y'all still give them your vote. And now he gave them something for the vote, and you're saying, how you gonna give them something for the vote? What you want black people to do?
Well, no, okay, let me ask you this, Mark. Do you think the sport of curling, when you're on the ice with the little pucks and all that, I don't know of one black person in the U.S. that plays curling collegiately or professionally. Is curling racist?
No.
Because blacks are just not interested in curling.
Well, what I would say is there's certainly some class race dynamics there, at the sense of you need equipment, you need access to certain social clubs, you need access to certain athletic organizations, you need access often to certain schools that poor people don't have access to, and black people are disproportionately poor. But I wouldn't call it a racist institution. But the difference is, unlike sports, where nobody thinks black people are inferior, if anything, they think we're super Negro that can do everything. Mm-hmm. In the world of academia, they do think that we're inherently inferior. There's been a long.
Well, that's because you got human beings deciding whether you get tenure track or not. Those are objective metrics there.
There's nothing objective about tenure track. But what
I didn't mean. I mean, it's all subjective, is what I mean. It's subjective.
But you take professorships out. I mean, academia in the broadest. I'm saying just intellectually, most of the West, including your founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson, thought that black people were intellectually inferior. All the European philosophers thought black people were intellectually inferior. All their theory thought that black people, that's what eugenics was all about. They thought Jews were inferior. They thought Italians were inferior. They thought the Irish were inferior. They believed in race science. They believed that some races were more intellectually competent than others. And so it's not just that these institutions have a bunch of white people in it. Curling is really white because it's in it happens in really, really white places. It's in cold places. It's in northern places. It's in water places. Stuff we don't really rock with, right? That's different. Question. That's different than if I try out for curling and they say, well, we don't think your body is capable we don't think you have the physical composition to do curling. Or if I want to swim and they say, well, black people aren't buoyant, which is what they say, right?
What Al Campana said.
Right. That is a racial.
I agree.
And I'm saying the Supreme Court is racial. Black people
getting on the Supreme Court has less to do with academic accomplishment judicially, more so than are you a part of the good old boys network? Which could not
white people.
No. It doesn't have to be a racist issue to be a part of the good old boy network or excluded from it. Now it's a relevant issue because guess what? If you didn't clerk for the right federal judge when you were in law school, that can hamper your ability to get considered.
And guess who got the clerk jobs? White men.
Yeah. Without question.
So again, it takes it back to the race issue and the race question, but I want you to think about this just a little bit differently here, because again, the fact that white men make up like 95-98%, I want to give you the exact number because I don't want to, because people quote me and cite me, but whatever the number is, it's in the 90s, it's in the high 90s, right, have been white men, right? That ain't because black people didn't want access to it. That ain't because women didn't want access to it. It's because they were systematically shut down. And there are people who believe that because being a judge is about being dispassionate and intellectual and rigorous and thoughtful and being able to be impartial, they don't think black people can do it. And you know who the main person who said that was? Your homeboy, Donald Trump, who said that Judge Curiel, the Mexican judge, said he could not be impartial because he's Mexican. So that same racist legacy that made him think that he was unqualified is the same legacy right now. The same legacy right now that continues to shut people out and that demands a response through DEI.